All right, welcome everybody. Maddie's insights are practical tips based on current research to help pets and people, and that you can use in your shelter. I'm Kelly Dewar, Senior Shelter Solutions Specialist at Maddie's Fund. And today we are joined by Dr. Rachel Morrison, Associate Professor in the Psychology Department at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing the results of your study, Dr. Morrison.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm just going to share my screen here. Give me one moment. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. I'm excited to talk with you. I'm Dr. Rachel Morrison, and I'm going to be talking with you about a recent publication that looks at exploring factors that influence public engagement of adoptable pets on social media. Before we get started, I did want to just briefly talk about this picture that's on the first page. So that is me with my current dog, Griffin, and that is the first day that we met at the local animal control when I went to adopt him. And we're going to be coming back to what was it about the profile that they had posted that made me interested in wanting to go see him. So I just wanted to introduce him to you before we get started. Thank you again, Maddie's Fund, for inviting me for this talk. So just an overview of what we're going to be covering today. We're going to be discussing the benefits of using social media for promoting adoptable animals. We're going to discuss prior research about which features of profiles or post content may increase public engagement of adoptable animals. We're going to be discussing the findings from the current study that I published with some colleagues of mine. And we're going to be talking about future research. So there's a lot of future research that needs to be done. I do have to highlight again this picture on this page. That is my dog Finley, who has since passed, but was such a great source of companionship for me. And I'm going to be bringing him up again later, so I just wanted to introduce him to you. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of using social media. As you all probably know, social media is not the only time that animals were being promoted for adoption. So organizations have been using their websites, they've been using places like Pet Finder to promote adoptable pets. So why social media? Like, what is it about social media that might be beneficial instead of just using the other traditional methods? Social media has been found to increase visibility for organizations, and this is not just organizations that are shelters or rescue groups. We're talking about all organizations. But specifically, using social media and increasing visibility is important for nonprofit groups who are really trying to get their message out to a wider audience. Social media also has the ability for editing and updating information, which is really great, especially when an animal has been adopted. So I think this ability to update posts and not have to repost every time is important. Animal's been adopted, animal is in foster care. Those are important updates that you have that flexibility with social media. You can create an online archive. So having all of your posts on social media is really important for having that archive. And you can actually go back and look at trends. You can look at how your posts are being used, which can be really useful. And you don't have to delete things. As I said, with the updating feature, it actually is helpful for having this online archive. Another big thing that social media allows you to have, I would argue more so than just your normal web page, is that you can form online connections and relationships with the users themselves. So people who follow your page. I continue to follow the shelters that I've adopted my pets from. I'm not able to adopt any other animals right now, but I'm constantly on their pages, right? I have formed a bond with those pages and the animals they show, and I want to see them be successful. And I share those pages and I share posts. So those kinds of online connections are important, both with users, but also with other organizations. So you can follow other organizations and you can help each other get your information out there by sharing information about fundraising events, sharing information about different activities or needs that your shelter might have. So it's a really good way to have this online community. And that online community can be anywhere in the world. It's not just local, which is super important. All of those things increase public engagement of animal shelters and rescue organizations posts. And that's the key, right? Is getting people engaged in the content. And of course, the most important content are these animals that we want to help. Now, of all the social media pages, research has shown that Facebook is the most popular. In 2018, the ASPCA reported that most shelters are using social media, and Facebook is the most used. 99% of the shelters said they use Facebook. Instagram came in second. And all of them also said that Facebook has the greatest impact on adoptions. So when they're using Facebook, that had the most impact on the animals getting adopted from their shelters, which is important. Now, that was from 2018, but what about now? So we have a more recent article from 2023. Now, this article was done looking at adoptions through the Portuguese Animal Shelter Association. So worldwide, Facebook is still popular. Facebook was used in most of the shelters over there. 95% of the respondents said that social media was important for adopting their animals, and Facebook was the most important again. So, a little bit more background about what may influence adoption. So, a lot of research has already been done about the features of the animal and what different features are important for adoption. And still today, if you look at the research, appearance is one of the most important reasons why people choose to adopt, but also why they engage with the animal's profile. So I want to come back to my current dog, Griffin. So this is Griffin in this picture, and this is the picture that was posted, the only picture posted on his profile at the local animal control office. And you saw a picture of my prior dog, Finley, all black, fluffy tail. That's what I was looking for. I was not looking for a dog that looked like Griffin, but look at those eyes. I fell in love. I saw that picture. Those soulful eyes seemed to be staring right at me off of the computer screen, and I knew I had to go and meet him. So, appearance is important, but maybe also how the dog is oriented in the picture and the pose. And we're going to talk more about those things as well. Now, the prior research that focuses more on appearance did note that this is tends to be more important for adopting dogs than cats. However, when people were looking at kittens, so pictures of kittens, appearance seemed to be more important. For cats, the behavior towards people seemed to be very important for choosing to adopt in this study. And this is all from the Weiss et al. Study from 2012. So for cats, behavior with people, dogs, more so appearance. Age was also really important for both cats and dogs. So as you might guess, kittens and puppies tended to be adopted more so. When it comes to the animal's behavior towards people, that's difficult to know in a static image. That's, maybe if you're looking at videos, you can get a feel for that. But what research has shown is when individuals want information about the animal's behavior, the most important source of that information is shelter staff and volunteers. And I wanted to just highlight that because Shelter staff and volunteers can give that information on these posts, even if they're not physically there talking with the potential adopters. Another thing that's important for influencing adoption is empathy towards the animal and the animal situation. And so we're going to talk in a little bit about the type of text and the tone of the text that is shared for animals. And oftentimes, developing empathy for the animals and what their prior life was like or what they're currently going through does seem to influence adoption as well. And that is also something that can be highlighted on posts on social media. Traits of the media that you are sharing. So there's been a lot of research that's looked at the different photo traits. So quality of photo is important. Photos that are clear, photos that don't have a lot of things in the background tend to be better at predicting adoption. Direct eye contact is something that has been shown to increase interest in adoption. There, that's exactly what got me interested in Griffin is that direct eye contact. Accessories in the photos. So what else is in the photo with the animal? Things like collars, bandanas, even toys specifically for cats, has been shown to decrease length of stay. So some of these studies are measuring length of stay at the shelter. So these animals tended to get adopted faster than other animals. So, if you're using social media, there's a lot of different types of media that you can use in your post: pictures, videos, text, and emojis. And there isn't a lot of research directly looking at emojis. I only really saw one other study that was talking about emojis specifically for um, rescue animals and shelter organizations. So we'll talk more about future research later, but I wanted to point that out. What about videos? So, research that's looked at videos on social media has shown that the videos can be really important for highlighting specific aspects of an animal's personality. Most of the time, animals that are shown in videos are perceived to have more positive traits. So, things like intelligence has been measured, obedience, trainability, playfulness of the animals as well. Cats, there was some conflicting evidence with cats in that in some videos, even though videos of cats made them seem more adoptable, they also sometimes appeared more aggressive. And that, of course, could potentially hinder them from being adopted. So the study that was really looking at this pretty much says that you need to be cautious about what specific activities you are showcasing in those videos because you don't want to promote behaviors that might have a more negative connotation. Also, videos are time consuming. They are time consuming to record good videos and then upload those videos. So if you are going to use videos, it's important to choose them at the right moments. Choose them for the specific behaviors that you want to highlight instead of investing so much time on just everybody gets videos. It may not be appropriate for all animals. Let's talk more about the text that is on these posts. So, prior studies have shown that the tone and content of the text is important. Clear descriptions of behavior has been important when advertising adoptable animals. It's preferred and oftentimes can lead to more adoptions. So I will talk more about this with my study in a few minutes, but we didn't have a lot of descriptions on the posts that we were viewing. And so there was some lacking information, and that could potentially hinder things. Let's talk a little bit about the emotional content of the text. So when I say emotional content, that could be labeled as more negative sounding text, but really what we mean by negative is we're describing sad situations. about the animal, or maybe the animal's history or currently how they're doing. And again, those emotional types of texts will allow individuals to have greater empathy for the animals themselves, which has been linked to greater adoption. Individuals have looked at different accessories in the photos, as I mentioned before, and yes, humans can be considered an accessory in those photos. And so the question has been, does having a human in the photo with the animal matter? Is it important? Does it make them seem more adoptable? And there is, of course, conflicting results. In some situations, having a human present doesn't matter. In other situations, it does have a positive impact. So there was one study that was done that showed when pit bulls were portrayed or pictured with an elderly woman or a young boy, they were seen as more positive. And obviously, when you're dealing with an animal that has a stigma like a pit bull, anything we can do to make them appear more adoptable and friendly and positive is a good thing. But it may not be important for other breeds or other types of animals to have a human in them. And to highlight that, I want to focus on one specific study that I thought was really interesting. And you may want to go back and look at this study at some point. So there I am in this photo with Griffin. I'm super happy. I just adopted him at that point, but I want to note his pose in this picture on the leash. Sometimes having a static image of an animal on the leash can change the way we view them, and that's important. So this study by Isgate and Couchman in 2018 was a really cool study because it highlights the importance of the pose of the animal in the image that you might be using. The other cool thing about this study is that they used eye tracking software to track where potential adopters were looking at the images. And they had predicted that potential adopters would look more at the face area, so the eyes, nose, and mouth, to um, determine personability or personality of the animal. And in their study, they had 4 different breeds that were pictured. They had golden retrievers, they had Dobermans, they had Rottweilers, and pit bulls. And they were pictured in 4 different images. So there was an image of them all standing, there was an image of them all sitting, an image of them sitting with a human handler, and then there was an image similar to the one that I have here, where the human handler was walking the dogs. And so they looked at several different features um, with the potential adopters in that study. They looked at adoptability, and the Golden Retriever had the highest adoptability score, not surprising there. Um, but the images of the animals sitting alone was the highest rated pose, and that was not expected. So, not sitting with the human, but sitting alone. The Golden Retriever and the Rottweiler scored highest when sitting with the handler. So there was an interaction between the type of dog and having the handler, but in general, having the human handler there was not necessarily beneficial. They also looked at friendliness. And when the animals were sitting alone, they were rated highest for friendliness as well. And I was going to show you the figure from the article, but I wasn't sure if I could share it. But when you, if you decide to go back and look at the article, they have a really wonderful figure in there, figure 1, with all of the images. So you can see that when the dogs are sitting, they look very relaxed. And I think that has a lot to do with the friendliness score. Again, Golden Retriever and Rottweiler scored highest when sitting with the handler for friendliness. That makes sense. Friendliness leads to adoptability. They also looked at aggressiveness, and the most pictures that were rated highest in aggressiveness were the pictures with the individual walking on the leash. Now, their pictures showed the animals facing forward, unlike my picture where you get a profile. And so it's possible that the animal facing forward and it's a static image could make them look a little bit more protective. I was surprised as well that that's the image that was rated higher in aggressiveness. The golden was rated highest in aggressiveness when standing alone. The picture of the golden retriever standing alone was interesting because the dog was stiff and alert and its mouth was closed. And for whatever reason, people are perceiving those things as meaning more aggressive, whereas I just pictured it as the dog was just alert. My guess is they probably had a treat to get the dog to stand still, and he was really focused on that treat. So Goldens were, as I said, highest when standing alone. Dobermans were highest when sitting with the handler, and this is a really important point. In that specific photo, the handler had their hand on the back of the dog's collar, which he did not do in any of the other pictures. And again, I wonder if that may be perceived as, you know, the dog needing to be held back. So you really have to be careful when you are going to have humans in the photos. How are they being, interpreted with that animal? So there's very few studies that actually measure engagement with social media posts, and that's what's interesting to me. And so, what do we know about engagement? Well, you can measure engagement on social media in a lot of different ways. Shares, likes. And we know now that likes aren't just the thumbs up anymore. You can use the heart emojis, you can use the care emojis. There's so many different emojis. The two most popular emojis that are often used, according to the Videra et al. Study from 2023, was the thumbs up and the heart emoji. What's really cool about Facebook specifically that I want to highlight is they have so many metrics for the owner of the page. These metrics all measure engagement. So clicks, likes, shares, comments. They even measure reach of your profiles, which is important, engagement rate. You can get metrics on video engagement as well, views and watch time and reactions. So there's a lot of opportunity for you as an organization to know how much engagement your posts are getting. Research that has looked at engagement has shown that there's increased clicks on profiles related to decreased stake time for cats. So we do see that the more clicks a profile gets, the quicker the animal gets adopted, at least for cats. That specific study had only looked at cat profiles. And so it seems like engagement may be linked to adoption, which is important. When looking at the sex of the animal, there was no difference in the number of clicks that animals received, which is interesting because some prior research has shown that male animals may get adopted quicker than female animals, but then there's other research that shows the opposite. So there's a lot of conflicting research out there on whether or not sex matters. There's more engagement when sympathy for the animal situation is present and when there's more photos and videos on the posts. So again, there's not very many studies measuring engagement, but these things seem to matter, right? And those things may translate to adoption. Lastly, what are the accessories in the photos? Specifically, toys in photos increased clicks. Clicks are engagement and profile views for cats, but not for dogs. So dogs that had toys, there did not really seem to matter, but cats definitely did. And possibly, that playfulness factor in cats is maybe important for potential adopters. So, one trend that I've seen recently is these artificial photo backgrounds that some shelters are using. And I wanted to highlight an article that actually looked at artificial backgrounds. And these photos are from a local animal shelter, Hope County Animal Shelter, who gave me permission to use their pictures. And I love what they're doing at their shelter. They really do try hard to picture the animals in the best way they can. But they posted both of these photos on the same post. So you could see the animal in their natural environment, and then you saw this artificial background. Does that matter? So far, I only know of this one study that's looked at it, and what they found in their study, they did the study with dogs, 4 different breeds, 4 different backgrounds, and artificial background type did not affect participant link clicking behavior. So engagement was not different for the different backgrounds. What was important was the animal themselves. So the actual animal was more important than the background. Background type did not affect sociability either. So it takes time and effort to create these really wonderful artificial backgrounds, and maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe we need to do more research to see before we spend the time, making those backgrounds. Maybe it's just the fact that this adorable cat is looking at us and that's enough, right? So again, more research needs to be done on that. So that's the background. I want to just, now talk about the study that I published with my colleagues. So we explored whether or not post content influenced engagement of Facebook posts. So we were looking at features of photos and videos, subject and tone of text, type and sex of animal. We also had the opportunity to compare differences between 2019 and 2020 posts. We actually started this study during the pandemic, so we thought that might be interesting to look at because at the time there seemed to be a lot of interest in adopting animals. So we looked at animal shelters in different counties of North Carolina, where I'm from, both rural and urban. Ultimately, most of the shelters that ended up on our list were rural shelters. They needed to be affiliated with the ASPCA, SPCA, or an independent nonprofit organization that really were active in rescuing and adopting animals out. And the of course, most prominent social media page was Facebook. So we focused on Facebook pages. We analyzed posts, 592 posts, which was a bit challenging. I will say we had several research assistants helping us scroll back to the posts. And on those posts, we analyzed content from 1,041 photos and videos. So a lot of the posts had multiple photos and multiple forms of media on them, and that's why there is almost double the amount of things that we looked at. And we focused on 13 shelters. We decided to focus on the fall of 2019 and the fall of 2020 for our comparison prior to COVID and during COVID. 10 shelters had posts in both 2019 and 2020, so we focused on just those 10 shelters when comparing year. So when just kind of describing the types of content on the social media posts, we found that photos were typically used, which isn't surprising, and very few videos were used, which does support the prior research that has shown the same thing. About half of the posts listed ages as unknown. So there was a lot of missing information on a lot of the posts that we looked at. When age was listed, kittens and adult dogs were the most common aged animals that were being promoted at that time. Emojis surprisingly were not used that often. And this really surprised us because we thought that in the text we would see use of a lot more emojis. Very few posts had a negative tone, which again surprised us because we thought, given that empathy for an animal situation is so important, we thought that more organizations would have more of that kind of sad negative tone, but most were positive or neutral. We also wanted to look to see if posts used anthropomorphism. And so, for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, anthropomorphism is when we attribute human characteristics, things like thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to non human animals, even objects sometimes. So some examples of what we would consider anthropomorphism to be in the text. So one animal, they said Forrest Gump of a kitten. So they're pretty much saying that this kitten's like Forrest Gump. And then they wrote out a complete inner monologue that this cat was having. So oftentimes posts that were written as if the animal was talking, um, or the animal was engaging in human-like behaviors, we considered anthropomorphism, and we did not see a lot of that, which surprised us. When we looked at engagement, so to measure engagement, we looked at likes and shares. And so we wanted to see if the type of animal had different amounts of engagement. And indeed, we did see that posts of cats are in green, had significantly fewer likes than posts of dogs. Similarly, posts of cats had significantly fewer shares than posts of dogs. And that was not surprising to us. We did predict that we would see a difference in engagement, and we thought that dogs would have greater engagement than cats, only because we had seen research that had shown that dogs were being adopted more often than cats. Although in 2023, some of the stats that I had seen had shown that cats were actually had increased adoptions that year. So it may depend. We looked at engagement for the sex of the animal, since in the research prior to ours there was conflicting evidence, and we did not find a significant difference for male and female animals for likes or shares. So we still don't know if sex matters, and maybe it doesn't. People have their own individual preferences. We also wanted to see if the environment that the animal was depicted in had an influence on engagement. Now, this slide is specifically for cats. We were not able to do analysis for dogs because very few photos of dogs were of dogs in a kennel or a cage, which I think does show that people have actually thought about how they want to visualize animals, and it's oftentimes easier to take dogs out of the kennel versus cats in some situations. But we actually didn't see that being depicted in a cage was important for engagement. We saw the opposite of that. Images of cats in other environments had significantly less shares than images of cats in homes and unknown environments. So let me describe what the unknown environment was. Typically, those were close up pictures of the animals, and so we couldn't tell what environment they were in. And that's interesting because it's possible that when animals are depicted close up, there's more engagement because viewers aren't distracted by the type of environment they're in and the features of the environment. And so that could explain that. And then the home environment, again, when cats are being pictured in a home, it may actually link back to their behavior with people, right? And the friendliness aspect. And maybe that's why there was more engagement with those photos as well. We also, as I said, looked at pre and post COVID, and we did find a significant difference in engagement between the years, but not in the way that we had expected, because there seemed to be um, greater interest in adoption during 2020, during the pandemic. We thought that both likes and shares would be higher in 2020. But posts from 2019 had more likes than 2020, and 2020 had more shares than 2019. One of the things that we were thinking about that might explain this could be that when people are working from home, they have more time to actually engage in the posts. Sharing um, involves a little bit more engagement than just liking a post. And so it's possible that they had more time to think about um, the animal and its situation, and they wanted to share that animal maybe to their own page or to friends who are adopting, whereas liking just takes a click. So that could explain that. So some overall conclusions. We believe that the type of animal and environment the animal is depicted in can influence engagement. So I have two pictures here of the exact same group of adorable puppies that were available for adoption at my local shelter. And one image is of them in the kennel with the kennel door still there. And then the other image is of them still in a kennel, but you just don't see the door. And that might matter, it might not matter. We need to have more research on that. But just looking at those two images, is it the sympathy for the first image that might make you want to go and meet those puppies? Or is it the cute factor in the second image, right? We need more research needs to be done to see if it matters. So organizations may be able to influence engagement of their posts by being more descriptive in the posts themselves. Giving more detailed information about the animals is important. Potential adopters want that information. And this could be a good opportunity for shelter staff and volunteers to maybe have a little, quote about the animal, to give potential adopters information about their personality, especially if we're only seeing images and not videos. It's important, we think, to advertise animals separately. So I know because of time, it's a challenge to take a picture of each individual animal, or even a video would be even more problematic or challenging potentially. But it does seem that having one advertisement of one specific animal on the post is helpful. Also being mindful about the environment in the photos and videos and what else is in there. So not just are they in a cage or outside, but what are the accessories in that environment as well, because those are going to be factored in to the decision potentially. So lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about some future research because there is a lot of it that still needs to be done. More research should be done looking at, as I just said, environment and toys or other accessories may influence engagement. So we did actually look at a lot of accessories in the videos and the pictures that we were analyzing, and very few of them had toys, so we couldn't do further analysis on that. Very few posts had humans in them as well, so we weren't able to do an analysis on that either. So we really need to have more research done to see if that affects engagement. More research needs to be done comparing videos and images. We don't have enough research to know if one is better than the other. We just know that we need at least photos or videos on the posts. More research should be done about the text descriptions. What's in the text? What's the content? What's the tone? We need to know if people are actually focusing on specific adjectives that you might be using to describe the animals, and are there certain adjectives that we should avoid? I just want to just highlight one example. A prior study was actually looking at labels of breeds and how that might influence adoption. So, do you give the breed label in the text description or not? And one study showed that taking out the label actually was more beneficial for dogs that had stigma attached to them, like pit bulls, for example. So they showed pictures of pit bulls, but didn't have the label pit bull, and people saw them as more adoptable and friendly. Again, we need more research to know if that is useful. Pose and orientation of the animal in the images or videos is important as well. Um, you know, when they're looking at you, I mean, look at this picture of this cat upside down. Like, this is the cutest picture. And yeah, it's gonna make me think that this cat is friendly, right? Just from that picture. More research needs to be done to determine if post engagement reflects adoption rates. We had planned in our study on really focusing on engagement and adoption, but very few of the actual posts were updated to say that the animal was adopted. We did try to reach out to the shelters to get information about the animals and whether or not they were adopted. And we had a really hard time getting calls back, emails. And I'm not blaming the shelters at all. This was COVID, and people were losing staff, especially in the rural areas where we were doing our research. A lot of those shelters, I know for a fact, barely had enough staff to make sure the animals were taken care of, that it was not a priority for them to be focusing on, social media and calling back a professor who's like, "Hey, I'm doing this study." But more research does need to actually be looking at if engagement translates to adoption, because that's the whole point of having these social media pages and posts, is for us to be able to help get those animals adopted and get them out of the shelters. So I just want to say thank you to my co-authors, Dr. Maria Mossmole and Tracy Ferry. Tracy Ferry was actually a research assistant with us, an undergraduate student who worked really hard. And after she graduated, she continued to work with us on the data and write the paper. So I'm really proud of her. We had two other research assistants, Eleni and Alexa, who worked tirelessly to go through those social media posts. It was very difficult. I'd also like to thank the ASPCA Open Access Publishing Fund, who covered the fees for us to publish the article in the journal Animals. And of course, thank you again to Maddie's Fund for inviting me for this talk. And lastly, thank you to the Hope County Animal Shelter for permission to use a lot of the photos in this talk. They do amazing work on their social media pages, and they really work hard to get the animals adopted. This QR code, if you scan the QR code, it will take you to the article. So it is open access, so there should be no paywall. You should be able to download the full article, and all of the references that I talked about in this talk are available. The links are in the reference list on that article. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Awesome. So we will be taking questions. The first one is just a personal one for me because you had said eye contact is important, and I totally would agree with that. And this morning I was actually working on a post, and the cat had her there it was a really dark photo, but like her eye area was just like basically like black hollows. And it occurred to me that like you can't connect with a pet if you can't see their eyeballs. Like
Mhm.
you know?
Yes.
Um, does that make, I don't know.
No, it makes sense. And I think that it's interesting that the research that has looked at, right, position and orientation has shown that. And we have so much more data left that we have not gone through. I mean, this was a huge data file, and we did note the orientation of all of the animals. We noted whether or not they had floppy ears or ears standing up. We just haven't had the chance to get through all of that yet. So maybe there's paper number two coming, but
Yeah.
um, it matters, right? Like
Hmm.
connecting with them. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say that Griffin was looking at me when I saw that post. It really does, I think, draw potential adopters in.
I think so too. And I think editing photos, if they come in like the one I was describing, can be really helpful because I was able to get them after a few minutes of tinkering with it to where you could see your eyes. Anyway,
Lighting matters.
yes, for sure. Um, Peter wanted to know if you could share 2 to 3 examples of good social media posts. I imagine you probably don't have them like right off the top of your head,
I
but
don't.
if you want to share them on Maddie's Pet Forum on our thread, it would be great.
I can. So I don't have, so when we were doing the research and going through all the posts, like it was really, there is no easy way to go back in time on Facebook besides scrolling. Um, but I could talk to one of the current shelters to try to get permission to share. I mean, well, I guess I don't need permission just to share a link. So I'll find a few of what I think is good based on what we found and what prior research has found, and I can send you those links. Um, I did try in the talk to show you some of the pictures I chose that were from Hope County, apart from the sad one with the puppies, behind the kennel door. I think are great images that show, again, the animal facing forward, even the cats, the little tongue sticking out, like those kinds of little features make the animals look super friendly. And sometimes cats especially really need that, because
Totally.
they get so stressed out in shelters. And I just think a lot of the times they're just pictured in the cage. And so I can look for three and share them with you all, and we can maybe put them in the discussion board or the links in the
Cool.
discussion board. Would that work?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I noticed those cat pictures, by the way. They were very, very cute. What about posting or not posting single photos of the youngest kittens, which which shouldn't be solo pets, or which the organization may be adopting out only as another cat? Is a lot of organizations, a lot of rescues will adopt out kittens, but they won't adopt them out like a single kitten. The person either has to have another cat in the house or they
Gotcha.
are adopted with another kitten. And so
Gotcha.
like would it be right to put, or like would it make sense to post single photos of those kittens if they
Got it. So it is actually challenging to post single pictures of kittens and puppies, litters, right? Because they're usually together in a puppy pile, like the picture that I showed. And so I think at that point, and especially if you are wanting the animal to, if you are trying to showcase that this animal does good with other animals, I think it's okay to do that. What we were seeing is on some of the posts, we'd see like five different images of different animals all on one post, and there was so no individual descriptions of the animals, right? So that's kind of more of what we were suggesting you not do. I think it's fine if you have like two or three kittens, whatever, the whole litter of kittens there, if you're able to give descriptions of them and then follow up with maybe some individual pictures just so people can get a feel for the individual personality of those kittens, that could be helpful. But yeah, it's there isn't a one size fits all to this, and there's still a lot of research that needs to be done.
absolutely.
Hope that answers the question.
Um, okay. This one says, if you don't know the age of an animal, would you recommend posting a guess or an estimate?
That is a great question because we did have a lot of unknown ages, right? I would say a best guess would be good. I wouldn't, unless you were not confident, right? But a lot of the times, you can at least say they are an adult, right? Or young adult. Or, usually you can tell if they're puppy or kitten, right? You can usually tell if they're a geriatric or senior animal. Even if you don't know the specific age, like giving those kinds of descriptors would be helpful. Senior pet, adults, and you can even say between ages, right, of what you think an adult would be considered, right? Or under two if you think it's a young adult. And a lot of shelters, if they have, sometimes they have vet staff that come by, they could maybe take a look at their teeth and kind of help give a better estimate, but they're all estimates a lot of the time. But something is better than nothing, I think. The more descriptive is better. At least that's what the research has shown.
All right, then I have a question.
Yes.
Because one thing I really like to do is like tell stories about pets. Like
Mhm.
this is something this kitten did during the day that like touched, that was like touching. And then and so it's not necessarily a bio, but I always put the link to the profile there so that if somebody wants to know how old they are, they have a way. Does
Mhm.
that make sense? Do you think that
Yeah,
Mhm.
so are you saying that you'll just kind of post a story without like images of the animal, right? You're just
Oh,
like and that you'll
with
link
pictures,
with pictures. Okay. And
or
then
video?
the profile is like in a separate place. Is that what you're saying?
It's in
They're
the
not
text
all
of the post,
got it. Okay.
like
Um,
learn more at whatever.
I gotcha. Yeah. I think that's fine. And I think those kind of stories are what people want. When I had mentioned that research shows that people get their information about behavior from staff and volunteers, if they're not actually physically showing up, and because some people will, they'll show up at the shelter and say, I want to look at all the animals, right? And make a decision. But nowadays with social media, they're making a decision, I think, before they get there. I mean, I kind of knew that I was going to go home with Griffin before I actually got there. So it's helpful if you can have those kind of anecdotal stories about sweet things they've done. It gives the reader more information about their personality because people need to know, is the personality of that animal going to match my personality? Because the last thing you want is animals getting returned, right? And so you want to have a good match. So the more information you give means that the adopter can make a better educated decision about it.
Okay. Um, Melissa says, I'm curious if Dr. Morrison and her team considered general social media use during the time of their study. For example, I know many people who spent less time on Facebook or spent time in a different way during election years, which obviously includes the fall of 2020. Did you, I,
I mean, I mean, that's a great point. We didn't think about election. Yeah, we didn't think about like what people are doing on Facebook during that time as far as influencing. Because if you're just on social media and you're not focused on adopting a pet, right? I think that that's what she's highlighting, right? You're going to be more focused on news sources and things like that. We didn't look at that. I mean, we were focused just solely on these shelters and what they were doing with their posts. But I would say that that is something that maybe shelters need to be aware of is how are people using social media in general and are they even getting to your page, right? How do you get people to your page? And that's where these relationships and partnerships come in with non-animal shelter organizations. So if you can partner with organizations in your community that can share your information, maybe if you're not on getting, if your feed isn't like mine, which is full of animal shelter pages, right? Maybe you're going to catch information another way. We didn't really look at that, but that's a good point.
awesome. Um, this is, how often should you change profile pictures for long stay pets?
Oh, that's a great question. And I don't have a specific answer to that, but I do think this is strictly my opinion here at this point because I don't think anyone has looked at that, right? Like, does changing the pictures often matter? I do think that novelty, just being a psychologist, I know that novelty is important for humans, change and novelty. And I think that this could be a really interesting study actually to look at, but I think it would probably help to update pictures, right? Instead of just using the same picture you usually use, which again I know is hard for shelters because I know it's a time commitment, right? It's almost like you need a separate person in charge of social media and pictures, and most shelters don't have that ability, to have someone do that. So maybe volunteers could help in that way. But it would be, I think, good to have updated photos. And also, again, if you're like me and I follow these stories, I like to see updates about the longer residents
Yes.
and how they're doing. So give me updates. I think it's good.
That's awesome. One thing that I have seen happen over and over is with like a long stay pet and they start posting kind of regularly on them and then somebody who is following along and gets to know them and then ends up adopting them. I've seen it happen several times and it just is like so cool the way that it can kind of work out there.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, yeah. Do the shelters you researched the social media for do post-adoption surveys? The shelter I volunteer at, SPCA of Tompkins County, New York, sends surveys to adopters and among other questions asks how or where the adopter first saw the animal.
That is a great question, and I don't know if they do that. Because we were using social media and because they were publicly available pages, um, when we did try to contact the organizations for other information, for like adoption information, and didn't get access to them, I don't know what kinds of surveys they, if any, are giving. Again, some of the shelters, not all of them, but some of them, aren't even open anymore, which is sad because they were independently run shelters in some of the real rural communities here. And I went back recently to just to try to kind of get more information, and there some of them just didn't make it through COVID. So I don't know. Yeah, it's
Bummer.
sad. Yeah.
Yeah. Any insight about the impact of various types of collars, leashes, harnesses in dog photos or videos, or about how many photos are best to promote an animal? Like, is there such a thing as too many photos?
Is there a magical number, right? These are great questions. I don't know. I am just trying to think. I don't think any of the articles that we researched actually looked at number of photos. Just having photos was important. Having a photo or video was important for engagement and adoption. But I don't know if anyone's looked at number of photos. I I would say that the one of the issues I could see with having too many is more so just a time constraint for you all, for the shelters and the rescue organizations. Um, I think novelty again is important, so choosing photos wisely. If a bunch of the photos are very similar, I don't think they're necessary, right? I think they need to highlight the animal in different positions, potentially doing different things. Then that might be important. But one photo that's really good could be enough, right? At least for that one post. As far as colors of the leashes and collars, I don't think they looked at color either. Having a collar, having a bandana, for whatever reason, made animals viewed as more adoptable. Maybe they could just see them, right? You know, as I think it's a friendliness factor too. Oh, we can put a collar on them. We can put this bandana. They're not freaking out. Um, it I think people do like to see animals sometimes dressed up for holidays. And so there's a couple shelters we saw that at Christmas they had like the little Christmas hats on the animals. Now, not all animals are going to tolerate that, and some people don't like those things either. So, you really have to be careful with the kind of accessories that you're using. I think a collar versus just a slip lead is usually preferred for people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. hmm Absolutely. All right, last question. Um, Hello, I volunteer with One Love Animal Rescue and we foster in our homes. Your information on poses and information on post was really informative. Question, we are receiving a large group of dogs from transport and we normally post all their photos together. Do you feel that if we post separate photos of each with the details of each dog with each, do you think we would get a better response with prospective adopters?
I do. I do. Based on what we've seen and what other researchers have talked about, I think you're better able to highlight that individual animal. I mean, think about it. When you have too many choices and it's hard to engage with one specific animal when you're looking at five all in one post. I do think it is one of the things we saw that was problematic, even for us when we were analyzing the posts, is we couldn't always identify which animal was which that they were talking about because they weren't being descriptive enough. So we had a picture with six different animals, and we could maybe identify two or three of those animals, but then weren't sure of the others. So I do think it's better to, if you can, to at least highlight them individually for one photo and give descriptions. And then if you have a group photo, that's fine. That way they can, figure out who's who.
One potential idea. What do you think? I used to when I was working with this one rescue, we would do a Friday post where we would do like a whole bunch of available dogs and cats, but it would be each one's individual picture. But then on each picture, we would put either the bio of the pet in the comments or a link to their profile. So you saw all of them together, but if somebody's interested in learning more about one, they can kind of go there. Thoughts?
So it's one picture with all of them, and then
It's like 10 separate individual pictures.
gotcha on one post.
hmm
And then they can click in the comments.
hmm
Um, here's I think for some people that works because some people,
Mhm.
um, will take the time. Think about what social media is doing for our attention span. Again, this is a psychologist in me talking. Attention spans are not very long, especially for people who are on social media. So that's going to require them to look at all of those, right? Photos, click into the comments to be able to find the link to click. Do you see the steps that are involved?
Yes, I never thought about it that way because I was
And
like, they always got shared a lot, but like, are they able to like concentrate on each pet individually or like quality over
yeah,
quantity?
I don't know. I
Hmm.
think I think we would I think it'd be a great study to look at these things, but I do think that some people are not going to take the time to do all of those steps. Uh, Sharing is faster, liking is the quickest thing you can do, right? Um, and so I think if the information about the pet is sort of embedded in the comments and then you have to click another link, people will do it if they're truly interested, right? Um, but not everybody's going to do that. And maybe that's okay. Like maybe we only want the people who really are that invested. It's hard, it's hard to say because again, time management is important. You want to get as much information on there as you can, right? Um, yeah, I would
Absolutely.
be a little cautious about it.
I could ask you questions for like 17 more hours. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I
But
am
we
happy to
are
answer questions.
thanks. We are over time. If you have questions, we will be on Maddie or Dr. Morrison will be on Maddie's Pet Forum to continue the discussion and answer questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Morrison. This was great. And thanks to everybody who has been watching today's webcast. And thank you all, and we will see you next time.